Welcome back to the channel, you guys. It is Comic Kid here again, and today we are counting down or up to the 10 best Batman action figures. Now, before we get started, this list is strictly limited to what I personally own, which does give it quite a few limitations, but I mean, I do own quite a few Batman action figures, obviously, which what collector doesn't? And then it is also limited just to like general comic book versions. There are 2 exceptions on this list, but they are general enough, and I'll get into some of the specifics as to why I included these as exceptions, but I did try to keep it limited to specifically comic book versions and not movie versions, because there are a bajillion Ben Affleck Batman figures and Christian Bale action figures and Michael Keaton Batman action figures out there, all of which have their own pros and cons and merits and stuff like that. So yeah, just comic book versions for this list today. And the last thing that I want to mention is, while I do have some Hot Toys and like Sideshow ones, I will not be including those just because those are so high end, and even the Sideshow comic book one that I have is just like a nice enough figure that I feel like it's in its own separate league of category. And so yeah, everything today will be limited to, I believe, 9 inches is the largest figure on this list, or less. But without any further ado, coming in at number 10, we have the first technically movie figure on this list, which is none other than the Michael Keaton Batman 89 retractable utility belt Batman. Now mine here is missing his cape. I believe I have it somewhere in like a random accessories bin, but I could not find it. And I do know that I never had the Batarang or grapnel gun that came with him. But despite being based on the 1989 movie, it is definitely a general enough Batman that you wouldn't really be able to tell. There are a few giveaways in terms of sculpt in regards to like the gauntlets and boots and stuff, but the symbol is incorrect. That is the classic one based on the comics and not the 89 movie. But what I like about this one is it is really kind of one of the earliest Batman figures that I ever had, and I feel like it's not that bad. It is certainly limited in its articulation with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points in total, unless you include the retractable utility belt here, which stretches pretty far. And despite the age of this figure, I do think it's a testament to the skills of the manufacturer that it has still lasted this long, and the fact that that string hasn't snapped yet, or that nothing else on the belt has snapped, I do think is wonderful. It was made by Kenner and released around the time of the movie, and so yeah, that is our number 10 pick. Coming in at number 9, we have the New Adventures of Batman action figure. This one was technically released by Hasbro after they acquired Kenner, and if y'all saw the last like Batcave retro review that I did, this was the Batman that I featured in that video. This one has even less articulation than the Michael Keaton one, but what I really feel like excels about this figure and this line in general was really all of the interchangeable parts. If you had this Batman, or like all the random ones like Scuba Batman, Rainforest Batman, whatever variant of Batman you may have had at this time, the line especially really excelled in making all of those accessories interchangeable. There were a few exceptions, like if you had Hang Glider Batman, that Hang Glider might only be able to snap in just based on the sculpt and whatnot, but I do feel like this general sculpt made for a lot of fun and a lot of unique accessories, and so this is more a celebration of the line, but I do feel like the regular old Batman figure in general is still quite exceptional. Our number 8 spot is going to go to the Darwin Cook Batman. This one specifically is from a 4-pack 75-year celebration of Batman. It came along with the Arkham Origins first appearance and Jim Lee Hush Batman. And while those are all great figures in their own right, I do think this one just captures such a classic style for Batman, which is definitely what Darwin Cook was known for with any of his characters. And so while this one may seem like goofy and cartoony, I really applaud it for that. It's still a more modern figure with a very retro style. And they eventually redid a similar figure for the DC Artist Spotlight line, I believe it was called. But I really feel like this figure is just quite the standout on its own. It has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 points of articulation on him, and so yeah, there's really not much to him aside from an exceptional sculpt that honors an exceptional artist. And I'm very, very pleased to have this figure as part of my collection. Our number 7 spot is the DC Direct New 52 Batman. This one is technically based off of Jim Lee's art, but that entire first wave of the New 52 line was based on Jim Lee's artwork. Eventually there'd be others based on Greg Capullo and Jay Lee and so on and so forth, but this was really the first Batman that I bought when I was consciously collecting figures, if that makes sense. What I love about this one is the sculpt. Again, it is not superposable, it only has 9 points of articulation, but I mean, I love the design of the New 52 Batman. I know some people are kind of against it, but the details in this figure especially are really what sells it for me. What I particularly love is how the cape drapes at the bottom down there. I just think it's such a nice effect, and it's such a simple pose. It's just nice and neutral for what I would say is still a generic looking Batman figure. And so yeah, this one lands at number 7 purely on sculpt alone, but I do feel like what it lacks in articulation, it definitely makes up for in just shelf presence. Number 6 on this list is going to be the McFarlane Toys Hush Batman. Now, this one that I have here is the first Hush Batman that McFarlane ever put out, and you can tell because he has the unpainted or just regular black elbow joint there. Eventually McFarlane would correct this figure, and for all future releases this was not the case. The rest of that sleeve would be gray. And so while I do think the blue variant and the wide release version of this Hush Batman are both technically better than the one I have, I do feel like you can pick any of those 3 to fill in this spot for number 6. But yeah, in terms of overall sculpt, he is exceptional. This is one of my favorite just looks for Batman in general. I love how the cape wraps around the leg there, just kind of naturally, and you can still bend it back slightly if you need. But in general, this is just one of my favorite feels or just vibes for Batman. And in terms of articulation, he follows the standard McFarlane articulation, but I have very much been pleased with what McFarlane's been doing at DC Multiverse lately. So yeah, be sure to check that one out. I do know the blue one is a little harder to find, but any McFarlane Hush Batman you can get between the 3, I would say is going to be worth it. At the halfway point here, we have the Hasbro 2000 Batman Guardian of Gotham City Batman. Now, I do not have all of the pieces to transform him back into Bruce Wayne. What I loved about this figure was that you could pop the head off and redress him to basically be a standard Bruce Wayne figure. And so the Batman is complete, the Bruce Wayne is not. What I love about this figure is that it's kind of like a great cross between the Mego line and still offers a little bit more articulation. I would say this one is incredibly well made too, given that it's been around for over 20 years now. And so yeah, I love this Batman action figure. I do have the Joker one as well, and so yeah, I feel like the spandex holds up great. It's a very well articulated figure given the time frame, and while the sculpt leaves a little bit to be desired, it is still one of my personal favorites, and I could just never ever get rid of this figure. I also feel like the Hasbro line of DC toys is a little underrated, but I mean, I grew up during that time when that was the toy line, and so maybe I'm biased, but you know. Entering the top 4 now, we have the McFarlane Toys Knightfall Batman. In terms of Blue Batman, this is the number 2 on my list. And as far as Blue Batman costumes go, I think this one is exceptional. And given that it was a technically wide release figure for McFarlane Toys, congratulations to those who were able to find it. I really feel like this is the best Batman that McFarlane has yet to make. Whether you have the blue costume or the black variant, this is easily one of the most classic looking Batman figures. You know, generally like the head might be a little too small or too big. This one I feel like is the most proportionately correct. And I also like a little bit of a slender Batman. I'm not quite the fan of like a tank Batman or like a skinny Batman. And so this one just checks all of the boxes for me, and given the price, it is easy to see why he lands so high. But in terms of being classic or modern, he just fits so well on any shelf, and he is currently the main Batman on my like McFarlane display for DC Multiverse. Kicking off the top 3, we have the amazing Yamaguchi Revel Tech Batman. What I really feel like sets this one apart in an obvious manner is the anime styling to this, and so it definitely offers a lot of like unique perspective in terms of sculpt, but this is also easily, hands down, without a doubt, the most articulated Batman in my entire collection, which Amazing Yamaguchi is known for their articulation and so on, and this figure would honestly probably be number 2 if it weren't for the cape. Even though there's a second edition of this figure that's out, they still kept the like clunky, awkward, articulated cape. And those who have the cloth cape mod, I am super jealous of, because with a cloth cape, I could totally have this figure at number 2. And even if I had a cloth cape for him, he would still probably land at number 3 just because it's a manufacturer thing. And if you're buying the figure, you know, you want the cloth cape. Nowadays, Yamaguchi tends to do more cloth than articulated stuff anyway, so I don't know why they didn't do one with the second release, but what you gonna do? But yeah, this Batman is easily one of the most posable in my entire collection. The extra accessories that he comes with are quite nice as well. And so anyone who has this figure, I would be kind of surprised to see it at least out of their top 5, just because it is a very, very well-made figure. Number 2 is going to be the fantastic MAFEX Batman. Now there are 2 versions of this figure still. There's the blue version, which was released first, and then the black variant, both of which were based on the Jim Lee Hush artwork, which has kind of been a theme of today's video as well. But it's just such a classic but still modern design, and so it makes sense that so many toy companies would want to base figures off of Jim Lee's artwork. This Batman excels with alternate hands and accessories and whatnot, but what I really like about it too is the cape. If anything, it is slightly too much cape, and I do know some people have made smaller versions for this exact figure. But when you really have the figure in a dynamic pose, the cape excels here. And unlike Yamaguchi, I love the fact that it's cloth. The wiring in it allows it to kind of like flow a bit more, and so the cape is really what I feel like solidifies this figure's spot in number 2. In terms of articulation though, it comes with the standard MAFEX articulation. It's an incredible sculpt, incredibly articulated, and easily one of my favorite Batman figures in my collection. And now, last but not least, what should come as no surprise, given the other figures at the start of this video, is the Mezco Sovereign Knight Batman. This figure is almost entirely cloth goods and has held up very well since its release. I do know that if he's in constant sunlight you can get some discoloration, but I do keep mine in a pretty dark room, as Batman should kind of always be, and so mine is held up very well. I have reposed him a few times, and the fabric still lasts, and there's really no rips or tears or anything in him. And so yeah, in terms of articulation, he's not the most articulated, but with the overall sculpt and the fact that he is cloth goods, he's still a very, very posable figure. The cape does technically come with external wires, so you can have it drape naturally or you can still pose it, but I really think those extra wires that Mezco sent with him are more trouble than they're worth, and so yeah. However, the accessories on this figure are incredible, and even though he is technically an original design, this is easily a very classic yet modern version of Batman also. And even though Mezco has technically two other Batman figures with the Ascending Knight and the Supreme Knight, I do think the Sovereign Knight is hands down the best one, but that depends if you like a leaner Batman or especially a built like a tank Batman. This one's just very middle of the road, classic, and so on. But that is everything that I have for you guys today. As always, thank y'all so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will be seeing y'all again real soon.